All right, the little box says that we are live on a Results on a Rampage Hangout. Today, this is a follow-up, actually, to our previous weeks and the weeks before that. So welcome to Results on a Rampage. The last weeks that we have done the show, we covered the results equation. We covered one term each week. And results, of course, is equal to up, which is understand the present, plus me, which is the mental earthquake, plus CF, which is create the future, plus CP, which is courageous planning, plus RE, which is relentless execution. I want to note the notable presence of our cat, which is up there on top. That was for Snowshoe, who isn't here yet, but hopefully will either join later or perhaps watch in Replay City. So Snowshoe, there is your buddy. So tonight we are going to cover a follow-on to the results equation, which is, okay, so now we know the results equation, the things that have to happen to create an awesome result in any area in your life, right? And still, even knowing that, even having the steps that we need to take, we don't often create the results. And in fact, instead what we have is mountains of excuses or reasons. They look like excuses if someone else says it. If we say it, of course, then they're good reasons why we don't accomplish what we set out to do or what we even committed that we would do. So one of the things I want to talk about first is the main topic of tonight is one of the main reasons that happens. Now there are tons of reasons why we don't do what we say we're going to do, right? Sometimes legit, mostly not. One of the biggest ones is tonight's topic, which is procrastination, right? The big word that is really the slow death of dreams. So the slow death of dreams is the topic tonight, procrastination. And I see right now we've just got one guest. Joy is joining us from also here in Canada. I'm in Edmonton, Alberta, in our international location, and excited to be here. Last week we did Results on a Rampage from an beautiful office building that we had, but the internet was a disaster. So we are now in another location, and hopefully we've got that managed and up to speed. Joy, can you unmute, and are you here? Can you hear me? No, I'm not hearing her. All right, so I'll just go on and talk about our topic. Joy, I see that you're muted. Can you unmute and say hello?
Hello.
Hey, you made it. All right, good. I've seen you come in and out several times. I'm not sure what's going on.
Yeah, I was just trying to get the link and that. It's just fussy with me tonight. That's okay, no problem.
Fussing with you. The link is fussy tonight. All right, so the name of tonight's Hangout is Procrastination. What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? Now, it's a rhetorical question, but at the same time, it's a very, very powerful and intense question because most of the time people don't dare really answer that question. What exactly are you waiting for? Okay, so when you think about just the name of the Hangout, what are you waiting for? Think of an important goal. In this process, I've thrown out a 90-day challenge, and a number of people have taken advantage of that, have written down goals, have made public commitments to some things. I know Griswold did, William Rock did, got a couple going, and there's some others that have also. Manny has, excuse me, have put out some goals, some 90-day goals that they're going to do, and some of them are progressing well, and I think all of them are progressing along. Hopefully they're apace. But often in my coaching business, goals don't start. They get articulated. Someone does it, and they may even articulate it very strongly and very powerfully and in great detail. And then what it lacks is an implementation focus, an immediate first step. So procrastination sets in, and immediately the question, what are you waiting for, becomes applicable. So I want you to think right now, whether you put down a 90-day goal or not, in connection with this particular challenge, you have set objectives, goals, things that you wanted to do before. And perhaps you're in the middle of some changes right now that you want to make. Personal changes, life changes, job changes, income changes, starting a business, expanding a business, fixing a relationship, whatever it is. Why are you not moving? What is it that you're waiting for? So since it's rhetorical and I don't have 10 people here to talk to about it right this minute, which is fine, let's talk about the common things that I hear about what are you waiting for. So I'm going to name a couple, and I'm going to ask Joy to jump in with one of the common things that she says. What are you? The answer is, what are you waiting for? I see Christopher's joined us, and he'll probably have some input in a minute. We also extended an invitation to Snowshoe because we have our cat token up there. So there you go. The question is, what are you waiting for? So one of the common things that I hear is, well, I'm not ready. I'm not ready to start my objective. And then, of course, the follow-up question is, what needs to happen to be ready? And most of the time, there isn't a good answer to that. Well, I have to have more time, more money. My life has to be different. And it ends up being this huge, well, you know, the world, it has to, I have to wait for summer, you know, I have to wait for spring that's 6 months away, size of thing that I'm, quote, waiting for. So one answer is, I'm not ready. So let me ask Joy. Joy, what's the most common thing that either you use or you have heard in the answer to the question, what are you waiting for when you're not starting a goal that you've set for yourself?
Just told.
You've muted again.
There we go.
All right.
Okay. Well, you know, that's sort of a tough one because things such as taxes, for example, you know, we know when our taxes are due, and that's one thing that, you know, I tend to procrastinate doing. I think because the task is just so large that I think I can't possibly get it done now, so I'm going to procrastinate and put it off. But the thing is, and this is something that, I mean, this isn't rocket science, but when you break the tasks down from one big one to either 5, 10, 20, 50 small ones, then that doesn't seem so ominous. It doesn't seem so, I can't get this done in a timely fashion. So for me, I think it is really looking at the task and saying, okay, how can I make this smaller because I don't think I can get it done now. But the other thing is that sometimes with things, I might not know how to do something either, and so that would be another reason why I would tend to procrastinate. So, you know, like there's one type of overlay that we want to create, and I don't really know how to do it. I will figure it out, or I'll, you know, find something or someone that can help me. But initially, it's either the task is too big, that's why I procrastinate, or I don't know how to do it, and that would be another reason why I procrastinate. Because we tend to do the things that we like most, that we know, and, you know, fun, that kind of stuff, and tend to, the other ones we sort of let go for a bit.
All right, so those are 3 reasons. I'm not ready. It's too big. I don't know how. I see Christopher's joined us, and hopefully Snowshoe's there too, looking at the cat icon that we brought there, right there, for Mr. Snowshoe. Christopher, what are reasons you use not to get things done? We're talking about procrastination tonight, the death of dreams.
Yikes. I would say the one is that I thought I had conquered years ago, but it still haunts me, which is the tendency towards perfectionism. It has to be perfect or I won't put it out there.
Right.
And that's one of the main ones. Another one is not having the right people in place. And if there was a third one, it would be just there's sort of the inner child protesting, saying, I don't want to do it and you can't make me.
Right.
So those are 3 really good ones. Perfectionism is one that sometimes has 2 meanings. Sometimes people say, I don't want to put it out till it's perfect, and they actually mean that, and that's powerful and keeps people from doing things. Other times that perfectionism is a masked fear of, I'm afraid it will suck and someone will reject it. Sometimes that, I personally sometimes fear that, oh dear, I'm going to put it out and somebody's going to say it sucks and then I'm going to feel bad. And so that's when, hey, I see Snowshoe, I didn't have the focus on him, we'll get it in a minute. All right, bring him up again. Where's Snowshoe? Okay, Snowshoe, you're not looking at the cat we brought for you. All right, there you go. All right.
That's just cruel the way I did that, but that's okay.
Yeah, all right. So perfectionism is one. Inner child, you can't make me. And Christopher mentioned a third, which has slipped my mind, but since we upstaged everyone with Snowshoe. But you can't make me is true.
And finding the right people, like I'm looking for somebody that haven't arrived yet.
Finding the right people, that can also be expanded into the right tools. I don't have the right stuff. You know, I'm not, that's kind of a version of I'm not ready. And all of these, here's the interesting thing, all of these reasons we procrastinate stuff and put it off can be legit. there can be actual reasons. I'm not ready. I can't do this today. I want to learn how to play tennis, and the only courts available are outdoor, and there's still snow on them. Okay, fine. You're not ready. You got to wait a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. That's fine. But most of the time, we overuse all these reasons, and the net result is the death of dreams. The net result is we actually never get started. We lose steam, then interest goes away, and the excitement, initial excitement we felt wanes, and we don't. And the sad part, and the reason I made it the topic of tonight's thing, is procrastination is probably the largest single reason people do not get done what they honestly want to get done. And then they sit in the land of wish and feel bad about, I haven't got this done. And then it turns around into this whole guilt and another whole show's worth of material. So we just heard a good list of procrastination reasons. Kristen's joined us. Kristen, tonight's topic is procrastination. As you saw, the death of dreams, and what I've been doing is I listed a couple of reasons why people procrastinate, why I procrastinate, or any of us do.
Yeah.
I listed some. What do you have to say about that?
I would like to add the fear of making it, because the fear of actually accomplishing your goal can be very scary, because then you add on like all this other responsibility that you have to do, and then it becomes like this battle, like, am I up to it? And you have to really have a strong base to really believe in yourself in order to allow yourself to make it. And yeah.
Okay, well, I've actually fear of success, so I would call that one.
Yeah.
People call that sort of fear of success. I'm afraid. I've heard that expressed a couple of ways. I'm afraid I will make it, and then I won't be able to sustain it. In other words, then the scrutiny that comes with succeeding, I'm not up for. I'm not going to be able to sustain it. And another one that I've heard, another way I've heard that described is, I'm afraid it will somehow change me. I like me how I am, and it will turn me into a success snob, and somehow people that now love me won't. So I've heard that expressed another way too. So we've collected a whole pile of reasons why we don't do things. Procrastination is ubiquitous, so we don't need to defend the topic or the fact that we all do it. The real questions that I have today is why we procrastinate. Why we've sort of talked around this, but what is the underlying reason that we gravitate to these things? I'm not ready, and I'm not talking about legitimate ones, so there's legitimate versions of all these, but this I'm not ready, or I'm afraid I will fail, I'm afraid I will succeed, I don't know how. I mean, all of these are actually solvable, and most of the things, we know the statistics, most of the things we worry about, they only exist here, and they never actually happen. So everybody that's on the Hangout right now and everybody that's going to watch it later is an intelligent person. We know most of the things we worry about don't actually happen. We know most of the things we're afraid of aren't real, and it's a dance in our heads. Yet over and over again we go to the place of choosing to procrastinate, choosing to live one of these excuses. I'm afraid for one reason or another, or I'm not ready, and I don't take the steps to get ready, and all of those kinds of things. So the next piece of our discussion here is to explore, why do we do that? What's the underlying reasons that we actually let ourselves get away with that nonsense and hence live for days, weeks, months, years, not doing what we inside at least have convinced ourselves we want to do? Christopher, I'm going to come to you first on this for just a minute. You have massive training in psychobabble, so why don't you tell me why I default to these silly excuses? Why do I do that?
Well, your little babbling brook of the psyche it has to do with the fact that, for the most part, we're actually trained, we're wired for self-preservation, and we're wired to appreciate the negative, any sort of a danger in our environment. And the path of least resistance is actually to focus upon the negative in order to protect ourselves. Now, we may go ahead and pervert that into a belief system that is negative, but I really do believe that the origin is that of fear, and it's fear to protect ourselves. Okay.
So let's explore that a little bit. Fear to protect ourselves. So let me give you an example of how that played out in my life. When I was in high school, as a senior, I was an accomplished pianist. I had started playing when I was 4, and so by the time I was finishing high school, I was already teaching piano lessons, and I was selected to be a piano soloist with a band accompaniment for Rhapsody in Blue. I practiced tons and tons and tons, but when the time came for performance, I played it okay, but it wasn't a good performance. There were some mistakes, and some ones that would not have been missed by the audience. There were some mistakes. On top of that, the band director, it frustrated him. He was unhappy, and he didn't scream at me or anything, but he just sort of shrugged and he said, well, it's just high school. And so that set of circumstances lived in me for a long time and created this very fear that Christopher's talking about. Self-preservation, in that case, wasn't a physical preservation. I didn't think anybody was going to die, but my willingness to perform, my fear that I would screw up, my fear that I would embarrass myself and others was there for a long time. And I already had a predisposition for that. I grew up with, all kinds of dysfunctional people in my life, and some real reinforcement of everything had to be perfect. Christopher's perfectionism. I grew up massively with the only answer is perfection, really strongly. So you combine that with his failure in high school as a senior at the performance, and it was the only one all year that had a soloist like that. I mean, all this stuff on it, and on top of that, the band director was obviously disappointed. So it created this self-preservation in me that for a long time said, oh crap, every time I either wouldn't perform or I would just expect to make mistakes, and I would frighten myself into mistakes, or it was just a terrifying emotional trauma. I would refuse, or I'd make mistakes, or the act of getting ready was really, excuse me, traumatic. Excuse me. So that's an example for me of how that very fear mechanism translated into something very real that lasted, quite some time that I had to work through. Who else has an example of preservation or fear? Well, I take a drink before I choke to share.
I guess you're all choked up about that. I've had similar experiences, only because typically playing the French horn it's like doing a high wire act. And so in orchestras, quite typically, if there was a mistake made in the orchestra, immediately most heads in the whole orchestra turn towards the French horn section, because it's really hard to control your instrument in higher registers. And I've done solos with an orchestra and a band and things of that sort, and have had those situations where what's the best way to describe this? Where just a major flub up, my worst fear coming true, and having people I know are just staring at me, but having to still continue on because, as they say, the show must go on.
Okay, good. So we both used a musical example, and that's cool.
I have a skating example.
Okay, go for it.
It's just a small one. I remember when I was going on for a performance, they announced my name, and I just ran out onto the ice, except I forgot to take my skate guards off and went sliding across the ice. Oh, yeah. It wasn't televised, I don't think. I can't remember, but it was just like, oh no, I wanted to just die. But I made up for it by doing a killer performance. But still, what you think. I mean, that's why, so many athletes and all these people have psychologists that travel with them, because, to psych them into getting back on track, because that, deviation from routine in a performance like that, can really mess you up unless you go back to, your center again and continue on. But I always remember that. That was the funniest thing. I thought, maybe not at the time, I thought it was funny, but, everybody else did.
If only there was YouTube back then.
Oh, you know what? I don't know. Maybe it's out there.
Isn't it amazing how, when you make that, when something like that happens, how you can either, depending on your training or maybe instinct, I don't know, maybe you guys can answer this, but how you can either make it work for you and you can have the best performance ever, and you get that adrenaline and you just work with it, and then sometimes it just makes you crash and burn.
Yeah, well, and it's funny, in the skating world too. Well, maybe we don't all know this, but there was one very famous Canadian skater. She looks awesome on the ice. This is 20 years ago. She looked really good. Her costume's really cute, and she could spin like nobody else. But then her jumps, she would just fall. Like every second jump, she would just wipe out. And then she just crumbled. And you could just visibly see her bottom lip start quivering, like in front of, millions of people. And it was just, and yet another person would have that same kind of experience, and yet they turn it around. But she could just never get it all she had the whole package, but she could just never get together like 2 back-to-back performances that just knocked it out of the park. And so today it's like she's not on any kind of skating tour. It's like she's probably teaching skating in some little town in Quebec somewhere, and or maybe working at Walmart. I don't know.
Like, what's the difference? What is the difference
between a Walmart and a skating place in Quebec?
A small town.
No, I mean, like,
a few miles.
I wonder if it's in preparation. I would assume it would be in preparation of the skater. I don't know. Or if it's just a natural hardiness factor that you're either born with or not.
Well, the mind, though, that's the real thing that it comes into play. Is like you really have to be strong psychologically, if that makes any kind of sense, because you can talk yourself out of, doing a jump or a spin or something, and it'll just be a disaster for you. But
so this goes right to the third part, so thank you for that. The third part I had written down is the process of ending procrastination, but we're talking about the mental processes, and you're both alluding to the mental processes involved in creating the result that you want, which is the focus, of course, of results on a rampage. So if you think about the mental process, what we came to is most of those reasons are based in fear, lack of preparation, lack of taking the action to find the knowledge, lack of overcoming those obstacles that may be real at the time but don't last forever. All of those things are based on, most of them, I won't say, I'm generalizing, I realize that, based on fear. And the process of ending fear and the process of ending procrastination are parallel. And so Kristen asked the question, okay, what's the difference? And what makes the difference in a person? And let's talk about that right now, because the process of ending that first starts with an intent to end it, because everybody knows, you guys both listed, okay, people can have a negative experience and they can use it to strengthen them and prepare them to move further, either immediately or the next time, or they can have it and it can cause them to crumble and crash and burn. You see that at professional athletes at every level. Someone in a basketball game or a hockey game, they'll make a critical mistake, and then either afterwards they recover right away or they don't. You see that in life, in preparation at a meeting. Someone will present in a meeting, and then from the rest of the time they're stumbling, they can't find their slides, they can't get it together. And you see that in a discussion in public. Someone gets a bad understanding, someone interprets something incorrectly, and from then on they're off. And the whole thing is off. Or they recover. So the question was posed, what's the difference? And the difference is in your head. The difference is in your mental preparation and your mental resilience. It is something that some people may or may not be more predisposed to, but it is clearly something that is learnable. Like someone goes to Toastmasters to learn how to do public speaking and how to not be affected as much by the pressure. There's certain techniques about how to look around and all those kinds of things, and this isn't a speech hangout, but it is very learnable. So the answer is it's preparation and it is learnable, and those are the two things that we'll talk about first. So that's what I want to lay down as the foundation for this, is the ending of procrastination, or the conquering of the fear that causes us to procrastinate doing what we want to, is learnable, and it is essential that we do it if we're ever going to reach our goals. So let me ask each of you to think for a minute about, and I'll give a first example. I'll just carry on with that piano one to tell you where that went. I want you to think of an example where you perhaps had a case of fear in your life that caused you to procrastinate, caused you to put off doing something that you later then conquered. And I want you to talk about the change that happened in your mind. Change that happened in your mind. So the piano example, I went on and opened a recording studio a few years later, and kept performing. The performances were really intense because the unique feature of my studio was that I didn't just record people, I actually did all the music for them. The specialty that I had was to take singer-songwriters and to do their whole thing with computers and synthesizers and that sort of thing, and that was a specialty that I had, which set me apart in recording studios. As a consequence, I was constantly under the gun, constantly, because people were paying by the hour. So to learn, understand, know, and be able to play the piano or string or other parts to their songs right away. And over time, I got to be good at it, in fact, extremely good at it, and was able to do really, really well in that area. And so that mental preparation and constant practice allowed me to turn that one fairly devastating thing that happened when I was 17 around, so that within a few years I was extremely confident and able to do that successfully. So let me have other examples. Who's got one?
I've got one. A couple.
Go for it.
Well, you know, one involves, I guess, sort of, you know, something a little creepy. So I had an apartment that was broken into years ago, and, you know, if it wasn't tied down or nailed down, it was stolen. So for many, well, I wouldn't say many years, but for at least a couple of years after that, I was just, you know, I had a real fear of, you know, going into a building by myself, especially a dark building, or going into, you know, an apartment building, all that kind of stuff, because that fear of, you know, maybe somebody's around the corner was going to be there. But something like that just took time, and then just self-talk. It's like, you know, the likelihood of that happening is very low, and I'm sure there's nobody around the corner, but if there is, I've got my keys handy, and I took some sort of self-defense course. You know, you just did things to prepare, you know, sort of a disaster kind of approach to things, you know, a risk assessment, and just, you know, plan something out. Okay, what's the worst thing that could happen? And typically it doesn't happen, but you still plan for it. I guess it's the project manager in me. You know, you plan for everything, and, you know, most often it doesn't happen. You know, I think that's kind of the one that had stuck with me for a while, and even today, I guess it sort of impacts on some of my behaviors as well, but in a good way, I think.
All right, good. Thank you. That's a good example of overcoming a fear. I'm going to relate all these to procrastination in accomplishing our goals. Most of the fears, as Joy pointed out, that we have don't happen. Okay, I mean, the fact that I even screwed the piano part up, nobody ate my lunch, nobody, you know, did anything to me, and it was overcomable with some more practice and some dedication. Her fear was overcomable with time, some self-defense courses, and some, you know, and some processes with self-talk. So that's a couple of really good examples, and about how to begin to approach that. Something was said earlier about breaking something down in small pieces too. I wanted to make sure that got mentioned, because things that seem overwhelming become less so when you eat the elephant one bite at a time, obviously. Kristen or Christopher, do you guys have an example that you'd like to share? Okay, fine.
Well, I was going to let him go first. Do you want to go first, Christopher? I see you now.
I mean, I can just give you a quick example of something that, you know, I've been trained in doing Hangouts, and on the second Google Hangout that I had ever done, our guest showed up only 2 minutes before airtime and had numerous computer problems, had to re-download his browser, this and that, and I was fully prepared at that point just to go on without him, even though he was the featured guest. And that process was one of, first of all, not wanting to seem confused, I mean, not wanting to seem foolish, and then just not really caring. I mean, making that switch that in my head that it really didn't matter how foolish things looked, the show must go on. So once again, maybe that's the performance type of attitude that comes into play. And I will say that I actually procrastinated for a long, long time on even doing any Hangouts, I think for that fear of looking foolish. And now I've come to recognize that if I play the fool, it gives me wide latitude for behavior.
So I like that. And you make two really, really good points. One is facing the fear by a little humor, playing the fool, gives you some wide latitude, some opportunity to diffuse. That works internally. It diffuses your own fear because you're less worried, and it then creates an atmosphere of a more relaxed atmosphere among the participants of anything. And so that's actually true in many situation. So, for example, a speaker that comes out on stage to speak that's deathly afraid of that, telling a joke, breaking the ice, getting things relaxed, having a lot of movement in during their speaking, moving out from behind the podium, perhaps moving in and out of the audience. All of those things are done to create a particular tone and atmosphere, but one of the fundamental things that it does is lower the level of fear, the level of focused attention, and the level of worry about a flub. I've done this, jump up on stage and miss and fall on your face, splat, and so there you are, and so you make a joke and you laugh at it. I was a keynote speaker at a place for a 3-day conference, and the guy that ran it was my friend, and on the programs for the conference he left the L out of my last name, which was extremely embarrassing, and he spent 3 days apologizing in public on the microphone for it, and I spent 3 days making jokes because I was a keynote speaker, so I could do whatever I wanted. But those are perfect examples of, and I know we're talking about procrastination, but the foundation of most procrastination is fear. Fear that we'll look bad, fear that we'll fail, fear that we'll succeed, and you can trace it back to that worry that something will go wrong. Most worries don't happen, and these strategies are ways to help you overcome that. Kristen, you had one for us?
Yeah, okay, so I used to be really, really tactile defensive. I was a dancer, so it might be kind of strange, but yeah, I was really anti-touch. I couldn't stand anyone touching me, and I didn't want to touch anybody else. I was just fine being in my own space. And so when the time came when I wanted to have children, I didn't want to be the kind of mom that can't touch her kids, and I knew that I needed to do something about it. And someone had suggested massage therapy. And so I went for it, and I faced that fear, and I went from not wanting to touch anybody and like freaking out about it to falling in love with alternative health, and I love massage therapy now. So yeah, I faced that fear, but that was that was pretty monumental. It was a process that took about like 2 years to really get comfortable with it.
So that's fantastic. So we have a whole bunch of examples of facing fears, some that are long-standing, some that doesn't matter where they come from, but the point is there's a process. There's a process for facing the fear. So I'm going to go back all the way, circle around to procrastination, why we don't do the things that we want to do, and why we engage in the slow death of dreams. We've talked about that the cause of most of it is fear of one thing or another, and we listed a whole bunch of those. And we've had a bunch of examples of fears that people have and different ideas about how to overcome them. For your information, and perhaps if you're interested, there's a place that I created an 11-part series called Master Your Monsters. And that talks about the procrastination and fear and it's not my fault and a bunch of other things that I called monsters. And I was making a play on, when we're kids, we have the monsters in the closet that are and under the bed that are going to eat our lunch, right? And when we grow up, we learn that there's nothing under the bed or in the closet, but we still have monsters that eat our lunch from time to time. So www.masteryourmonsters.com is, if you're interested in that, is a place to go look at some resources that deal specifically with monsters. So thank you. I'm just going to open the mic to anybody that has other comments about procrastination, either why we do it, how not to do it, or one final piece we didn't talk about, why is it important for us to do this? I mean, personally, I feel like it's so important because otherwise we create no legacy and we do nothing difficult of lasting worth if we procrastinate forever. So that, for me, is the motivator, but I'll just open it up and anybody can talk.
Well, I'll say I have a little something. Some of the things that I procrastinate about or I think about, it's not like the real big ones, like, oh, I'm not going to realize my dream of, winning that Academy Award because I'm no good and I can't. I've never looked at life like that. I never have. I had enough self-confidence and maybe because of performing for a long time, I don't know, but I've never looked at life as I'm afraid of success. I'm not one of those people who is afraid of success. Believe me, bring it on. I will embrace it. And I think I'm successful already. But for me, I get caught up in, A, I've got too much to do. like we all do, and B, some of it is, I'll do the easier things first, as opposed to really taking on the difficult, time-consuming, even though those will give great rewards, it's like, okay, now I've got to write a 10-sequence email sequence thing for Aweber, and that task just seems so large. But, the self-talk for me is, okay, do one, or do the headlines, or do the, subheads, or whatever, and just, you just got to get your hands dirty and just start doing it. What about those guys who spent 200 years building a church? I mean, they died before it was ever completed. You go to Notre Dame or you go to any of these churches anywhere in the world, generations of people were working on these things. So they never realized that maybe their tasks were just to carve those 10 stones. I don't know, and they did it, and so I think part of it is just really just, get out of ourselves and just do, execute.
There's a quotable, get your hands dirty and just do it. I'm going to write that one down.
I'll hashtag that. Too long. Hashtag get your hands dirty and go do it.
All right. Well, anybody else have anything to add before we close it up? Our 30 minutes is
sure.
up. We've had a good discussion. What have you got, Kristen?
Okay, so I was having a discussion with Mark Seidel last night and Grizz, and we were talking about fear of the unknown. And yeah, so you can have a fear of the unknown, and that's okay. But if you think about where you are right now, like you already know. You already know what's happening right here in the space where you're in. Why not believe that tomorrow is going to be better?
So that's powerful and good. Again, we tend to worry about stuff, and most of the stuff we worry about doesn't happen. So you actually have more reason to think that tomorrow will be better than to think it will be worse. Christopher, you got a comment?
I was just thinking, Teresa, you've mentioned this a number of times, and that is that your procrastination really is a manifestation of the inertia that you've spoken about a number of times. And in order to get over that stasis, you simply have to push that ball down the hill or get things moving. And having that ability to take a small snowball at the top of the mountain and push it so that it eventually becomes a giant snow boulder is something that's really significant. But it's those little actions taking place one after another that tend to accumulate.
Yeah.
Great final observation for us. Small actions, small actions. Because, look, you're not going to do a big thing without a small action. Nobody hit a grand slam in the World Series without first hitting 20 million singles in all the games during the regular season. It just doesn't happen. I mean, the people that win the gold medal won a whole bunch of other things running up to that, and they did the practice before, and we use athletics quite often because it is so obvious. But the key piece to take away from this is true in every aspect of our lives. Every one of you guys, including me, we're running a business or two or three. And we serve people, and we have family around us that depend on us, and we all have things we want to improve and change about ourselves. And the good message from tonight's Hangout is it is possible. It consists of numerous small steps, one after the other, and you'll never get to the end until you take the first step. All right, I'm done. Does anybody else have anything before we end her up?
I just have one question or comment. When we look at people, I think because we live in this instant everything society, the double click and download, and so we think that when we see people, successful people, we think that they just got there just yesterday. 15 minutes ago they were nobody, now they're, on stage winning an Academy Award or something. But and even when they themselves talk about situations, they go, yeah, 5 years ago I was doing nothing, I was sitting on the sofa. But, I think if you actually really looked at their life or anybody's life, you'll find that that's not so. There was a lot of hard work, a lot of slogging, a lot of this, a lot of that. There are the people who just go from A to B and it's just, lucky or whatever, I don't know. But for 99.9% of us, that's just not true. We have to take each and every one of those steps. We have to, do the heavy lifting. Nobody's going to do our push-ups for us kind of thing. So, I think because of the YouTube world and all that, and everything just seems so fast and sexy and, it's all so cool, but there's a lot of hard work that's gone on behind that. And today what we see are just the fruits of their whatever. I'm really terrible with cliches, so I always get them wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, most overnight successes take 20 or 30 years.
Right, yeah, and we see that. And then sometimes they'll say, oh, yeah, it was all, no problem. But I don't think so. Everybody's got bumps on a road. And I don't know that life would be really, it's not realistic to think that there are no bumps or speed bumps in roads. It's just, that's not reality. I don't think it is.
All of that's absolutely true, and actually I consider that the good news, because that means that this kind of success is actually accessible to anyone that's willing to do the push-ups.
Right.
All right. Any
Amen.
other comments? Amen. Hallelujah. All right. Well, I'm going to close it down, end the broadcast.